You know that moment when you're so tired you can barely think straight? When every step feels like you're dragging yourself through wet cement and all you want is to collapse into bed and let the world disappear for a few hours? That's where Marcus Webb was that Tuesday night. The rain had started around 9, not the gentle kind that taps politely on windows. This was the aggressive October rain that comes down sideways, the kind that finds every gap in your jacket, every worn spot in your boots, and reminds you exactly how thin the barrier is between you and the cold. Marcus had worked a double at Henny's Diner. Breakfast rush, then straight through to closing. 14 hours of burnt coffee smell embedded in his clothes, grease splatter on his jeans, and a lower back that felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. His feet had gone past hurting about 3 hours ago and settled into a numb throb that pulsed with each step. In his pocket, $43. Two 20s and three ones, folded and refolded so many times they felt soft as tissue paper. That was it. That was what stood between him and Friday's paycheck, between him and the electric bill that was already past due, between him and the careful mathematics he did every single day of his life. How much for groceries, how much for gas, how much could he tuck away for Caleb's winter coat, because the kid was growing like a weed and last year's wouldn't make it through another season. He was 10 minutes from home, 10 minutes from the two-bedroom apartment where his boy was sleeping, where Mrs. Patterson from 3B was probably dozing on the couch with her reading glasses still on and a thriller novel open on her lap. 10 minutes from the hottest shower the water heater could manage and whatever leftovers were hiding in the back of the fridge. Almost there. Almost done. And that's when he saw her. At first, it was just a shape. A dark lump against the chain-link fence at the edge of Ridgeway Park, half hidden behind one of those dented metal trash cans that the city never quite gets around to replacing. The streetlight above was flickering. It had been flickering for 2 months, casting everything in this unreliable, strobing yellow that made the whole block feel like a fever dream. Marcus slowed. His brain, sluggish with exhaustion, tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Not trash. A person. A woman, slumped against the fence like someone had cut her strings. Her coat, and even in the dark, even in the rain, he could tell it was expensive, was plastered to her body. Her head was tilted at an angle that made something in Marcus's chest go tight. Her skin, what he could see of it, had that grayish, pale quality that isn't quite right, that speaks to something seriously wrong. He stopped walking. For just a second, maybe 2, he stood there in the rain, water streaming down his face, his whole body screaming at him to keep moving. He had nothing to give. He was nobody. Just a guy who smelled like French fry grease and had $43 to his name and a sleeping kid waiting at home. What could he possibly do that would make a difference? She probably had people. She probably had a phone. She was probably just drunk or high or sleeping it off, and if he got involved, it would mean cops and questions and statements, and he'd be stuck here for hours when he had to be back at the diner in less than 12 hours. His feet wanted to keep walking. His exhausted, aching, rational mind wanted to keep walking. But there was this other thing. This stubborn, inconvenient thing that lived somewhere deeper than logic. The thing his mama had put in him before she passed. The thing Diane had loved about him even when it made their lives harder. The thing he was trying so damn hard to pass on to Caleb. The thing that wouldn't let him walk past a person crumpled on the ground in the freezing rain. Marcus moved toward her, his worn work boots splashing through puddles, and knelt down. The concrete was cold and wet, immediately soaking through his jeans. Up close, she was young, maybe 19, maybe 20. Pretty in that particular way that made you think she'd never known what it was like to choose between paying the electric bill or buying groceries. Her dark hair was plastered to her face. Her lips had a bluish tint. His hand shook slightly as he reached out and pressed 2 fingers to her neck, just below her jaw, the way they'd taught him in that CPR class he'd taken when Caleb was born. For a horrible moment, He felt nothing. Then, there, a pulse, weak and fast and fluttery, like a bird's heart, like something barely holding on. "Hey," he said, not expecting an answer. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. Her eyelids didn't even flutter. That's when the fear really hit him, sharp and clean. This wasn't drunk. This wasn't sleeping it off. This was something bad. His phone was out before he'd consciously decided to pull it, fingers clumsy on the wet screen as he dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, professionally distant, asking him questions he tried to answer while his eyes stayed locked on the girl's face, watching for any sign of movement, any change. "Is she breathing?" Marcus leaned closer. Yeah, she's breathing, but barely, and she's freezing. She's been out here in the rain, I don't know how long. Stay with her. Don't move her. Ambulance is 4 minutes out. 4 minutes. He could do 4 minutes. He shrugged out of his jacket, the thin, not quite warm enough jacket that was all he had, and laid it over her. It wouldn't do much, but it was something. He kept his fingers on her pulse, that fragile thread of life, and he talked to her. Quiet, steady. The way he talked to Caleb during nightmares. "You're gonna be okay. Help's coming. Just hang on. Just a little longer." He didn't know if she could hear him. He didn't know if it mattered. But it felt important to fill the silence, to make sure she wasn't alone in whatever dark place she was trapped in. The ambulance came screaming around the corner, lights painting the rain red and white. The paramedics moved with efficient speed, asking questions Marcus answered on autopilot. No, he didn't know her. No, she didn't have any ID on her. No phone, no wallet, nothing but that expensive coat and a thin gold bracelet on her wrist that caught the light as they lifted her onto the gurney. Marcus didn't even notice the bracelet. He was too focused on her face, on the frightening stillness of it. "You coming?" one of the paramedics asked, already halfway into the ambulance. Marcus hesitated. He should go home, he should check on Caleb, he should— "Yeah," he heard himself say. "Yeah, I'm coming." The inside of an ambulance, if you've never been in one, is smaller than you'd think. Cramped and bright and filled with equipment Marcus couldn't name. He pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way while the paramedics worked over her, their hands moving with practiced precision, voices clipping out medical jargon he only half understood. Blood pressure, heart rate, glucose levels. The numbers meant nothing to him, but the tone did. Urgent, worried, not good. He sat there, soaking wet and shivering now without his jacket, and watched a complete stranger fight to stay alive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow movements. The paramedic had an oxygen mask over her face, an IV line snaked into her arm. And Marcus thought about Caleb, about how small he'd looked in his own hospital bed 3 years ago with pneumonia, about how helpless Marcus had felt then, how helpless he felt now. Some things you can't fix with hard work or determination or love. Some things you can only witness and hope. The ER was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. They wheeled her away immediately, doctors and nurses surrounding the gurney, and Marcus was left standing in the hallway with a clipboard and a tired-looking intake nurse asking him questions he couldn't answer. Patient's name? I don't know. Date of birth? I don't know. Insurance information? I just found her, outside in the rain. I don't know anything about her. The nurse's expression softened slightly. "Okay, honey. That's okay. Why don't you have a seat? Someone might come talk to you in a bit." So he sat. He called Mrs. Patterson first, apologizing for being so late, promising he'd be home soon. Her warm, grandmotherly voice assured him Caleb was fine. Sleeping sound? Take your time, sweetheart. Then he just waited. The chairs were that specific kind of uncomfortable that seems to exist only in hospitals and DMVs, molded plastic designed by someone who'd clearly never sat in one for more than 30 seconds. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that particular frequency that gets inside your skull. The clock on the wall ticked forward with agonizing slowness. Marcus should have left. He'd done his part. He'd called 911, he'd stayed with her, he'd given what information he could. He had an early shift tomorrow. Today, actually, if you looked at the clock. He had a kid at home. He had exactly 0 reason to be sitting in this waiting room at almost midnight, still damp from the rain, watching strangers come and go with their own emergencies and tragedies. But his feet wouldn't move. Something held him there, some invisible thread of responsibility or connection or plain human stubbornness. He'd started this. He needed to know how it ended. Around 1 in the morning, a doctor emerged. Young guy, maybe early 30s, with the kind of exhausted eyes that spoke to a 12-hour shift. He glanced at his chart, then at Marcus. "You the one who found the Jane Doe?" Marcus stood up. "Is she okay?" "She will be. Severe hypoglycemia combined with hypothermia. Her blood sugar crashed hard. Diabetic, looks like, probably type 1. Add in exposure to the cold and rain." He shook his head. "Another 30 minutes out there, maybe less, and we'd be having a very different conversation." The relief hit Marcus like a physical thing, loosening muscles he hadn't realized were clenched. "So she's going to be all right?" "She's stable. We've got her warmed up, glucose levels coming back up. She'll need to stay for observation, but yeah, she should make a full recovery." The doctor looked at him with something like curiosity. "You probably saved her life." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. It felt too big, too dramatic for what had actually happened. He'd just stopped. He'd just made a phone call. Anyone would have done it. Except that wasn't true, was it? How many people had walked down that street before him? How many had looked the other way? "Can I—" he started, then felt foolish. "Is she awake?" In and out. She's asking questions, which is a good sign. The doctor paused. "You can stick around if you want. She might want to thank you." Marcus nodded, then sat back down. The doctor disappeared back through the double doors. More waiting. More terrible chairs and humming lights and the smell of antiseptic that all hospitals seem to share. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, a nurse was gently touching his shoulder. "Sir? She's awake. She's asking for you. The man who found her." Marcus rubbed his face, disoriented. For a second, he'd forgotten where he was. Then it all came rushing back. He looked toward the exit, then back at the nurse. "Yeah," he said, standing up and feeling every one of his 34 years in his protesting joints. "Okay." He followed her down the corridor, past rooms with partially closed curtains and the quiet beeps of monitors, past the nursing station where someone was laughing softly at something on a computer screen, past all the small human moments that make up the night shift in a hospital. The nurse stopped at a room near the end of the hall. "Just a few minutes, okay? She needs rest." Marcus nodded and stepped inside. The girl, woman, really, was sitting up slightly in the bed, an IV line in her arm, her dark hair still damp but pushed back from her face. Without the rain and the terror and the deathly pallor, she looked even younger. Vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the fact that she'd just come terrifyingly close to dying alone on a wet sidewalk. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life," she said. It wasn't dramatic or theatrical. Just quiet and direct and completely, devastatingly sincere. Marcus did that thing guys do when they don't know how to handle gratitude. A half shrug, a slight shake of the head. "I just called for help." "You stayed?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Nobody stays." And there was something in the way she said it that made Marcus understand this wasn't just about tonight. This was about something bigger, something older, some wound that had been there long before she ended up against that fence in the rain. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. "What's your name?" she asked after a moment. "Marcus. Marcus Webb." "Marcus." She said it carefully, like she was testing how it felt. I'm Sophia. Hi, Sophia. She laughed. A small, broken sound that wasn't quite humor. Hi. Then she asked about him. Not in that polite, going through the motions way people usually do, but with genuine curiosity. Where did he live? What did he do? And Marcus, tired enough that his usual guardedness had worn thin, just told her. He worked at Henny's Diner on Maple, had been there 6 years. He had a son, Caleb, 7 years old, second grade, obsessed with dinosaurs and basketball even though he was too small for his age to be any good at it yet. His wife, Diane, had passed 3 years back. Brain aneurysm. One minute she was laughing at something on TV, the next minute she was gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye. It was just him and Caleb now. They made it work. He said it all plainly, without self-pity, the way you'd describe the weather or give directions. These were just the facts of his life. Neither good nor bad, just what was. Something shifted in Sophia's expression as he talked. A recognition, maybe. Or grief. Or the particular understanding that comes from knowing what it means to lose something. I ran away, she said quietly when he finished. From my father. From everything. She stared at her hands, at the IV line. I didn't take my medication because I wanted to prove I could just disappear. Be nobody for a while. Turns out that's a lot harder than it looks. You scared me half to death out there, Marcus said. And then, surprising himself, he smiled. Something about the absurdity of it all, the randomness, the way life just throws these moments at you without asking permission. Sophia smiled too, tentative at first, then wider. A real smile that reached her eyes and made her look even younger. They talked for another hour. Marcus couldn't have explained why if you'd asked him. He had no logical reason to be there, no connection to this girl beyond 15 minutes in the rain and a phone call. But there was something about her. Underneath the expensive coat and the gold bracelet and whatever life she'd been running from, that reminded him of something breakable that still wanted to be whole. He recognized it because he saw it in his own bathroom mirror every morning. Before he left, she reached out and caught his hand. Marcus, please, can I have your number? I want to make sure I can reach you. To thank you properly. He almost said no. Almost made a joke about it, deflected, disappeared back into his regular life. But her eyes were so earnest, so desperately hopeful, that it felt cruel to refuse. He gave her his number, then headed home. Kissed a sleeping Caleb on the forehead, heated up some soup he was too tired to taste, and collapsed into bed. By morning, it all felt like a strange dream. Life has a way of pulling you back into its current before you can think too hard about the detours. There was breakfast to make and Caleb to get ready for school, and another shift at the diner and bills to shuffle and no time, no space, to think about a girl in a hospital bed or how close she'd come to not making it. 3 days passed. Then his phone rang during his break, a number he didn't recognize. Marcus? It's Sophia. Her voice sounded stronger, steadier. Hey, you doing okay? I'm out. I'm okay, thanks to you. A pause. I want to see you. There's something I want to talk to you about. I'm working. I'll come to the diner. She said it like it was simple, like there was no question about it. And Marcus, who'd learned long ago that sometimes it's easier to just let things happen than to fight them, didn't argue. She showed up that Thursday afternoon wearing jeans and a plain jacket, no makeup, looking like anybody else. She sat in his section and ordered coffee and pie and smiled when he raised an eyebrow at her. Between tables, between orders, shouted through the kitchen window, they talked. She asked about Caleb, really asked, wanting to know what he liked, what made him laugh, what scared him. She asked about Diane, and Marcus found himself talking about her in a way he hadn't in months. Not about the loss, not about the gaping hole she'd left, but about who she'd been. Her terrible singing voice, the way she'd snort when she laughed too hard. how she'd believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. Sophia listened with her whole face, leaning in, not waiting for her turn to talk, just absorbing it all. When the lunch rush finally died down and Marcus slid into the booth across from her, she folded her hands on the table and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "My father is Gerald Renault." Marcus knew the name vaguely. Real estate? Something about Forbes lists and downtown development and the kind of wealth that existed in a different stratosphere from anything he'd ever known. "Okay," he said carefully. "He wants to meet you." She held up a hand before he could speak. "And Marcus, this isn't about a handshake and a thank you. He wants to offer you a job." Marcus blinked. A job? Running a community initiative he's been trying to get off the ground for 2 years. A resource center on the east side, affordable housing support, job training, childcare programs. He's been looking for the right person to manage it, someone who actually understands what it means to need those things. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus looked out the window at the gray afternoon, at the street he'd walked 1,000 times, at the neighborhood that had been slowly hollowing out for as long as he could remember. "I don't have a degree," he said finally. He doesn't care. "I've never managed anything bigger than a Tuesday night shift here." He's not looking for a resume, Marcus. He's looking for someone who gives a damn, someone who stops when everyone else walks by. Why? The question came out harsher than he meant it. "Why me?" Sophia's smile was sad and knowing and achingly sincere. "Because you didn't know who I was. You didn't stop because you thought you'd get something out of it. You stopped because that's who you are. And my father." Her voice caught slightly. "He spent 30 years in a world where everyone wants something, where every good deed comes with an agenda. He's been trying to find someone real, someone who helps people because they're people, not because it's good publicity or a tax write-off or looks good on Instagram." She leaned forward. "You didn't even take my bracelet, Marcus. It's worth about $8,000 and you didn't even look at it twice." He hadn't. He genuinely hadn't noticed. Marcus took the meeting because something in him, the same stubborn thing that wouldn't let him walk past someone in trouble, wouldn't let him walk away from this without at least hearing the man out. Gerald Renault's office was bigger than Marcus's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year, the kind of space designed to intimidate. But Gerald Renault himself wasn't intimidating at all. He was 70-ish, with tired eyes and silver hair, and a photograph of Sophia on his desk that he kept glancing at like he needed to remind himself she was safe. He shook Marcus's hand with a firm grip and gestured to a chair and asked if he wanted coffee or water or anything at all. Then he just listened. For 3 hours, they talked. Not about Marcus's qualifications or experience or 5-year plans, about the East Side, about what people actually needed versus what wealthy donors thought they needed, about Diane and Caleb and what it meant to show up every day when you were exhausted and broke and scared, but you did it anyway, because what else were you going to do? About that moment in the rain when Marcus could have kept walking, but didn't. "I've been rich my whole life," Gerald said at one point, staring out at the city below. "I've written checks, funded programs, put my name on buildings, and you know what I've learned? Money's the easy part. The hard part is finding people who actually care, who see other human beings as human beings, not projects or demographics or photo opportunities." He turned back to Marcus. "Sophia told me you didn't hesitate. You just stopped and helped, like it was the only option." "It was," Marcus said simply. "She needed help." "Exactly." Gerald's smile was tired but genuine. "That's exactly what I need. Someone who sees a person who needs help and just helps. Will you do it? Will you run the center?" Marcus thought about Caleb, about the neighborhood, about all the people like him who were working 2 jobs and still couldn't make rent, who needed childcare or job training or just someone to believe in them. "Yeah," He said, "Yeah, I'll do it." The Renault Community Resource Center opened 8 months later on the corner of Maple and Fifth, 3 blocks from Henny's Diner, 4 blocks from where Marcus had found Sophia in the rain. Marcus stood at the ribbon cutting with Caleb on his shoulders, the kid squealing with delight, waving at Mrs. Patterson, who'd worn her good coat for the occasion. Local news cameras were there, and Gerald was saying something about community investment and sustainable development, but Marcus wasn't really listening. He was thinking about that Tuesday night, about $43 in his pocket and feet that wouldn't stop aching, and a choice that hadn't even felt like a choice. Some things you just do. You do them because your mama raised you right, or because you're tired and broken but still have enough left to care, or because there's another human being slumped against a fence and their pulse is weak, and you happen to be the one walking by. You do them because in a world that keeps trying to teach you to look away, to protect yourself, to mind your own business, there's still some stubborn part of you that refuses to learn that lesson. Marcus Webb had nothing that night. No money, no connections, no master plan. He had exactly what turned out to be enough: the willingness to stop. And it changed everything. Not because stopping always leads to job offers or happy endings or miraculous turnarounds. Sometimes it doesn't lead anywhere at all. Sometimes you stop and help, and nothing changes except that one person wasn't alone in their worst moment. But that matters too. That matters more than we usually admit. Years later, when people would ask Marcus about the center, about how it all started, he'd think about that rain, about Sophia's pulse under his fingers, fluttering like something barely holding on, about the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. And he'd think about all the people who'd walked past her before he got there. All the people who had their own reasons, their own problems, their own $43 and aching feet and kids waiting at home. He didn't judge them. He understood them. He'd almost been one of them. The difference between walking past and stopping, sometimes it's not about being a better person or more moral or more compassionate. Sometimes it's just about one stubborn moment where you decide that someone else's crisis matters more than your exhaustion. One moment where you choose to be inconvenienced by someone else's humanity. That's all it takes. That's everything.